Hello and welcome to episode 61 of the Crate and Crowbar. It is the 23rd of September 2014. My name is Chris Thurston and joining me today are the tame beard of Marsh Davies.
Hello.
And the increasingly untamed beard of Graham Smith.
Hello.
It's running wild.
It is running wild. What's the plan with that beard, Graham?
Well, we talked about this last night. I've decided to just go full beard.
It's been a long time. Beard. You've had that beard as long as I've known you.
I've had this beard about 5 or 6 years, and most of the time I keep it in check. But I think I'm going to have a long winter of looking like a hobo, and hope I come out the other side looking like either a rabbi or a pirate.
But you have such an orderly fringe. Is there a plan to change that as well?
Not right now.
Okay.
But we'll see how they match.
You look like someone put a pirate and a beetle, as in the musical Beatles, in that machine from The Fly. You're like...
Different kind of Scottish devolution.
Topical for last week.
And topical for this week.
Steam! What a perfect say.
Another kind of devolution.
Indeed, sort of. Is it?
Well...
Yeah, devolution of responsibility from Valve to create things to anybody who wants to make money.
Indeed, yeah.
Yes. What do you think about it?
What, the Steam... So we should explain what it is.
I suppose we
Someone wrote in to say that we should use the proper nouns of what we're describing more often, so that people who...
I don't mind nouns.
...happen to tune out when we introduce an idea aren't then lost for the next half an hour of podcast. And with that in mind, so Steam has been updated this week, probably the first major, overhaul of the store page in a couple of years. Probably since the Steam sales started, I don't think it's had a major overhaul. It's now blue. How do I feel about it being blue? I like it, Marsh.
Pretty good.
Okay. Graham?
A win, I think.
Owen?
Win.
A win. Okay. Blue is not the only major change, though. It's slightly differently laid out. But more importantly, people can now register to become... people who are administrators of groups can then sort of transform those groups into curated storefronts. So while the Steam homepage is now curated for you based on your purchasing history and filters you can apply, so you can filter out early access now, which is interesting. You can sign up to have your store populated or to see the pics of such illustrious organisations as PC Gamer and Total Biscuit. Do RPS have one yet, Graham?
Yes, RPS have one.
And soon us, I think. I think we're going to...
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, I think we're going to use it to... we'll use it to have an easy reference for games that we have recommended on the podcast. So it won't just be random recommendations. It'll be things people have been playing and liked because someone, another question we've had a bunch is I forgot how to find that game you mentioned that sounded good.
Yeah, we always have show notes. If you go to the website, if you download this from Apple iTunes, I sound like my mum.
If you download it to your Apple iTunes iPod.
Yeah. If you do that, you won't see the lovely show notes that we have put together for you each week, which give a pretty comprehensive rundown of all the things we talk about.
Yeah, true.
And often links to pictures of Chris on a horse.
If you want to find those show notes, you have to log in your web browser to crateandcrowbar.com. Don't forget the www. It is an internet page.
On the World Wide Web.
Yeah.
And surf on right there and, download you some HTMLs.
Indeed. But more broadly, do we have any feelings?
They seem to have made it more difficult to just get a list of what all the new releases are.
Yeah, that was exactly going to be my criticism. That's all I want. I just want a big list, which I don't need to scroll through multiple pages, and when I hit back, it doesn't do something strange in my browser window. I just want a large fucking spreadsheet of what's been released in the
Something
last week.
occurs to me, which is that this update has been meticulously constructed without considering the needs of people with Steam Press accounts.
I don't think it's necessarily that. I think it's just... Surely anybody wants to know what's been released in the last week.
To an extent, but surely this is a response to the fact that more games are being released on Steam than ever. I use Steam new releases to find out if something's come out that we should have reviewed and haven't, as I think people have done time immemorial. And often, obviously it's good to see everything, but often you don't need to see every DLC pack for every free-to-play game on Steam or, you'd want a degree of curation there, I think.
Publishers started putting on old titles, and so the new releases list was often just full of games from 1994. The publishers were just shoveling on there from their back catalogue. And so the thing they do now is that it's popular new releases. But that's even if you're not curating a review section in a magazine or anything like that, I think it's useful to just be able to see what's been added as a full list. And the way Valve argue around this is that every new game that gets added to Steam gets a slot on the front page of the Steam store page until it gets, I think it's like 2 million views or page views or something like that, or 1 million impressions or something. But the problem is that because the Steam front store page is so popular, that only takes about an hour, and then that's gone. And so, yes, some games within that hour are going to get spotted by people and get enough clicks that Valve's algorithms in the background decide that it's popular and pop it up. But there are going to be games which don't. They don't have a banner image which is immediately striking enough for that to happen. And so people coming along who just want to see everything that's just been added so they can pick for themselves, and those might be very often the people who are then going to create those games or promote those games or give those games a chance somewhere else on the internet. They can't do that now. You know, if you don't look at the store page for an hour, a game might be released, added to it, be really great, but not look that great in the screenshots and just be gone by the time you ever find out.
Yeah, you have to create a game that will sell itself in a single image, which is not necessarily a recipe for great game design at all, really. Because that's how Facebook ads work.
The recommendation engine on Steam is also total shit. And is, you know, they've kind of beefed that up, and that it's curating a kind of a store page just for you now, and that's more of a central part of the process. But it does things like say, hey, you've been recently playing this pinball game. Maybe you'd like to try Stronghold Crusaders 2, and that sort of stuff. Hey, you've been playing a lot of strategy games. What about Braid? These are both actual examples.
Brought you Horizons, nerd. Horizons.
These are both actual examples that we encountered earlier today when we were exploring it. And it's like, well, that's not...
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense. So
maybe it's trying to re-inject some kind of serendipity back into it. Because one of the problems with any kind of created system, or one where you select your own kind of taste, is that your taste becomes very insular, and things that you might just stumble across just don't surface quite as often. So maybe those recommendations are designed to be actually contrary to your tastes in some way. Maybe that happens occasionally, you know, just to push you out your comfort zone. But the main thing that I think has got the internet in a bit of a stupor this evening is about whether, and it is kind of a real issue, not to dismiss it, is that I think a lot of curators who are existing media organisations or personages who comment on games probably going to find it quite tempting to say, I will recommend your game using my curation system if you give me money. And I haven't quite decided to what extent that's a bad thing yet. Obviously a bad thing if it's not flagged up in any way. But what do you guys think about that?
It's tricky. Like in any other context, for example, any other kind of, you know, user curated system like Reddit, there's a system in place for flagging sponsorship. If you think of, I don't know, a subreddit is sort of equivalent to a curated channel on Steam now, to a greater or lesser extent, then the role of advertising in Reddit is really, really well defined. If they give curators the ability to flag something, give it a special border or whatever, and say, you know, this is my promoted recommendation, then obviously you devalue the recommendation of it, but you bring it in line with ethics in a way that hopefully is beneficial. But then that's sort of weird because Steam becomes an advertising platform for other people, which is maybe something Valve would be into, because it's basically about turning people's existing audiences into money for them in a new way that's directly connected to Steam, that sells more games through Steam specifically. But it's questionable. It's one of those things where there'll be a gold rush as people figure out that you can do this, and then hopefully some sense will prevail. But
is there any currently integrated way of getting a cut as a curator?
I don't think so, but it's more about the money that's changing hands outside of
that.
Oh,
yeah,
right?
No, I mean, if that doesn't exist, then it's happening outside of it, certainly. But I mean, in terms of the Steam Workshop, for example, has lots of ways of doing that kind of thing already, where, you know, you can divvy up a percentage of sales for a particular item to various different people.
Yeah.
Valve love doing that with creators, but they've never done that with curators. They don't have there's no affiliate system built in.
No.
So there's no way as a curator of these things to make money from the sales that you're generating, which I'm kind of surprised by. I thought that's the route that we'd go down.
Originally, that's what they discussed, but they've maybe backed out of that a little bit. I can see it causing problems.
Yeah, I'm not terribly comfortable with it.
Like, what if you just made a single page that just happened to have Skyrim on it, and you just absorbed some passive income from the fact that occasionally someone is going to find Skyrim through your thing as opposed to through any other method? Like, I don't really understand. I don't really know how you would qualify the input of the curator in that regard.
Yeah, it's going to throw up a lot of kind of interesting and already existing problems of people in essentially the media encountering crossover between their personal and professional lives. Like, obviously, I mean, you know, it would be mad if Tom didn't recommend Gunpoint if he became a curator, because that's the game he made. But he's, you know, arguably not that much of a game journalist anymore, although he does appear in this podcast, so maybe he is some kind of journalist. Hard to say. Something like Total Biscuit, who recommends PlanetSide on there, which he hasn't been paid to do, but he did work on PlanetSide. So it's hard to know. I mean, you know, I'm sure he's done that with a clear conscience, but it's how clear that is for other people, I suppose.
It feels like the way to use it well is to have some sort of system for determining what you include on your list. So in our case, in the podcast case, that's we've talked about this game in a way that we would recommend it, and this is just a resource for that. I think the way we're doing it in PC Gamer is it's any game that scores above a certain amount and is on Steam. So it's almost detached from any other kind of thing. So it's a little bit like our Editor's Choice Award, which we also give a discretion for a sort of certain skill threshold. And that, I think, is a good way of doing it, rather than having any other kind of arbitrary sort of just preference kind of come in. I think the thing that'll happen... Well, so the old argument with regard to stuff like this is that if all you're doing is not necessarily even editorializing on the game, you're just presenting it to somebody, or you know, or kind of as part of your kind of curated offering, this is true for YouTube as well, then it's still at the consumer's discretion whether they go on to purchase it. It's that old argument about whether or not inclusion on a YouTube channel is, by default, promotion of some kind. The old get out for not having to declare certain paid for YouTube videos as paid for. This is not something that's affected me professionally, but I have heard, or I've had argued it back at me, is that, well, you know, this is not editorial. This is simply for some other purpose, entertainment, or just, you know, a rundown, a list or something. Therefore, it's not promotion in the same way. Whereas I think this will start to really sort of show the fuzzy line there, where it's like, it is an endorsed list, even if it's not got an endorsement sort of smack bang on top of it. But that, I think the first time you hear that get out used, when someone gets caught, I don't know, taking money to put the games on their curation page.
The thing is, I think everybody should obviously have a conscience.
You'd hope.
You'd hope, but the thing is, there's no way to legislate for that, and there's no real way to enforce it. And so, at the end of the day, it does become kind of buyer beware, and you have to, as a consumer of any kind of, you know, journalism flavoured media, you have to kind of
4% pure journalism.
Yeah. Mechanically recovered journalism. Yeah, we get most of the time. But you just have to look at the people you're listening to and make your own decision about whether you trust them. Like, I don't know whether... I couldn't say to our listeners, trust me, you know, I've worked on games, and I've talked about other games, and... You know, I'm friends with game developers.
Yeah.
And at the end, you know, somebody has to just have to make their own choice about whether I'm
awful
or not.
It's just that information needs to be out there, and the information very often isn't. It's hidden away, or it's obscured, or it's just not there at all. So consumers can't make the kind of the decision, the educated decision that we hope that they will, you know, even if they want to.
It all depends on how the service is used. Like, if we end up in a scenario where people are, and I suspect some people will be like this, some people just sort of blindly make their purchasing decisions based on things that their favourite internet guy recommends, where that kind of fandom mixes with consumerism and becomes, like, where there's a sort of, like, I really hope Valve don't, I hate the word, gamify that side of it too much. Like, I don't want to, you know, because there's a situation, this would be a very Valve-y thing to do, to say, if you buy the game through this guy, this channel, you get this channel kind of like badge on the game. You know what I mean?
Oh,
so it's
God.
sort of like
Yeah,
you know
there's
that
not going to be specific DLC for particular curators.
that kind of thing. Well, not even specific game content, but like imagine if in your Steam library it has a little icon for the person you have bought it through, not from. That kind of thing. If it taps into fandom in that way, that kind of like collector brain mindset, where it's like, oh, I want all of my games in this guy's version, and then people are rebuying their Steam libraries through someone's curated feed just so they can get a little icon next to it. That sounds dumb, but it could fucking happen.
It's the point 2 years from now where there's the Total Biscuit sticker book of Total Biscuit posed in different images, and you're collecting them all by buying these games and leveling up your sticker book in order to get better Total Biscuit rewards.
Or PewDiePie, or any kind of, anyone that's really got a fan, or PC Gamer, like, that would be awful.
What
Basically,
kind of stickers would you have as PC Gamer?
I don't know.
Chris on a horse.
Yeah, Chris on a horse is a shoe, isn't it?
Yeah. Me on a horse, me killing a zombie, all the other photo shoots we've done, me in athletic gear, bench pressing a keyboard, that kind of thing. Like, yeah. Anyway, but yeah, so that would be insidious and shit, and I hope that doesn't happen. I think as a curation resource, it could actually be cool. Like,
yeah, there's already good libraries being set up by people like John Blow and Steve Gaynor of Great Games.
I mean, I'd like to go on the channel for the guy who just really knows his grand strategy games. If I'm interested in getting into grand strategy games and have a sort of place to browse them, not necessarily to, buy everything on the list, that'd be interesting. Like, I think, in a way, that's fine. As a, that's a legitimate expansion of the service in a way that is alright. It's whatever happens next that will determine whether or not we are all just plugging the back of our brains into the fucking money, cyberspace, awful internet matrix. And then we just become credit cards, ticking over, pretending to play games that will never actually even boot up. It's dreadful. Oh well. Nothing I just said made any sense either, which is really...
No, you lost me ages ago, actually, but then I started thinking about the Matrix.
On that note, though, I've I've made a pledge to myself that I'm going to break through some of my Steam back catalogue. Because all this curation stuff is totally relevant to me now, because I have more games than I could ever hope to finish. And it's an interesting exercise if you go through, just remove everything from your favourites list, go through your Steam catalogue and add every game to your favourites list that you seriously intend one day of your life to finish. Because that will reveal two things. How many games you own that you don't actually want. I think I own Darkstar and I don't...
I don't even know what that is.
It's like a space sim. Came out like 5 years ago, 6 years ago. It was shit then, apparently. I don't know why I bought it.
I bet it was in a sale. And
it was
like £1.20. And you went, I like space.
And then like 6 months later, 2 years later, when I don't have £1.20 for the bus and I walk home in the rain, it's fucking Darkstar's fault. Or mine.
You've not got long though to finish all these games.
Well,
before before you die, before the autumn avalanche of awesome games gets released.
Yeah, exactly. Because new games come out all the time, and I don't want to play the old point-and-click adventures I own. I want to play exciting new shiny things. But
yeah, you don't want to play point-and-click adventures.
No, I've convinced myself that I'm going to though. That's going to be my next thing. I don't know when, and it's not going to happen. But I've just got a really big favourites list now, full of games I intend to one day actually.
What's at the top, Colin?
Oh god, I want to finally get through The Witcher, which I've talked about a million times. Just the new one's coming out and it looks all right, and I feel like I should play the others. I want to finally get through like loads of like the Tale of Tales games, because I own all of them and I've only ever played like a couple of their things, and that's not going to take me very long.
No,
so that's fine. I can
You'll make pretty quick judgments on them, I think.
Okay. I want to get through. I never played Metro Last Light, and I love Metro 2033, but I want to replay 2033 on the PC because I played it on Xbox first time around. And the Redux version as well. God, what else on this? It's a big list. LA Noire, I feel like I should have at least played some of.
Oh yeah. Oh, we should. Yeah, can we play that together?
Yes.
We should definitely watch.
Done.
We should video us playing that.
Fine, we should do a video playthrough of LA Noire.
You will have lots of amusing thoughts about the way it's captured the life of an LA detective circa 1950.
Cool. Yeah, no, it's just an incredibly long list. I think this is part of a 2-part cycle, and in a couple of months I will rue that list, present it quietly, and bit by bit delete the entire thing.
Yeah, this is the way it happens. I've never made like a list of favourites on Steam, but I quite often go on Steam and go, yeah, I've always been really meant to play that game, I'll install it right now, and I'll download and install 6 to 8 games, and then I just never play any of them, they're still there. I just come back a month later and install a different 6 to 8 games, which gradually fill up my hard drive, and then start uninstalling them. It's good. What is like, this is PC gaming.
Ownership is such a weird thing.
Yeah.
I started this observation the other day, so I'm not going to talk about it too much, but like I've been playing mostly console games recently. Just kind of wanted to move to the living room. Just like it in there. It's nice. I got a PlayStation 4, and the games are really expensive. You know, that's not new. Console games are really, really pricey. They're like £30 to £50, and
especially this part of the new generation.
Yeah. And this isn't necessarily a good thing, and I'm still a big advocate for games getting cheaper, because I think they should get cheaper. But I found that I have played all 3 of the games that I own on the PlayStation, and so I've maintained a kind of hit rate with regards to purchasing, to getting any entertainment out of something, that completely shits all over my experience with the PC at the moment, where I have hundreds of games, most of which I will never even fucking boot. So, the argument, while it's shit that the games are that expensive, I've actually found some sort of satisfaction in, like, I've bought my one game, and now I'm going to play this until I had my money's worth out of it, rather than just get all of the entertainment value of that entire fucking enterprise out of clicking purchase, which is probably where most people's satisfaction with Steam comes from. It's like, it's all gatherer, no hunter, you know, it's just...
Buying things is a game, you know, it is a game, and Star Citizen seems like the clearest example of that, where the game doesn't exist yet, but people are buying spaceships in it, and then buying things to decorate their spaceships in it, and then, you know, and these are spaceships that very often you can't see or fly in the game yet. You can't walk around them and see the fish tank that you've just bought, but you are constructing that fantasy in your mind of, I am a Star Citizen, I am flying around space. You know, you're living that life through buying things, and I think buying things on Steam is the same thing. You're living the life of a PC gamer by buying things on Steam.
Wow, what a life it is.
I know.
I think that's maybe it, like, I was going to talk about Elite today, so Star Citizen is so the cladding that's behind me keeps touching me in the back in a really creepy
It's not
way.
touching you in the back. It's completely static until you move into it. You're touching it with your back.
All right. I take the cladding side in all this.
Yeah.
Knew you would.
Poor cladding.
Anyway. So, I mean, the ongoing internet palaver between Star Citizen backers and Elite Dangerous backers is the nerdiest and most pointless fight ever conducted in human history, I think, in terms of just sort of pointlessness. Would you agree?
I've not witnessed any.
Really?
Yeah, no.
Oh boy, you don't write website stories about either of those games.
No, I don't.
I like the dumb fights, because I feel nostalgia for like Quake 3 versus UT.
Yeah.
And I've grown bored of LoL versus Dota. So I quite like, you know, whenever there's something like that comes along, something new to fight over pointlessly.
Yeah.
Do the developers these days ever throw some smack talk around?
Not that I've seen. I think it's sort of dangerous in the era of like crowdfunded things to start poking fun at other people's crowdfunding, because the argument about crowdfunding is always, has it justified the amount of money it's raised, regardless of how much money that is, and that's probably wobbly. You know, it's a bit of a stones in glass houses situation for anyone who's raised money under
I do
similar
wonder
circumstances.
every time Dr. David Braben,
The Brabster.
yeah, the Brabo, whenever he says how they focused with Elite Dangerous on just getting the ships right and making the ships feel nice and making the combat good, like on that core, whenever he says that they focused on that, whether that's a direct response to the fact that Star Citizen very clearly didn't and went full batshit expensive.
Yeah. So I've played a lot of Elite now. I'm really looking forward to the patch coming out next week, and that's because I don't have access to Star Citizen. I've never played it. I've watched some videos and seen how the flight model works, and it's obviously got some issues at the moment. That it's alpha, whatever. The advertising for Star Citizen makes me feel a bit ill. Genuinely. Partly because of the amount of money they're asking, like $200 for a ship that doesn't exist yet. And it's clever what they're doing, because these things are extraordinarily expensive for digital goods. You know, we're looking at people spending thousands and thousands of dollars on spaceships that in the game that will hopefully eventually exist and live up to the promises that it's making. But the other thing is they're being advertised kind of like luxury cars, like all the adverts and the thing that's, all the in-universe trailers they do for the new cars are all done like adverts, like car adverts from the future, basically. And the fantasy is not just, I get to own a cool spaceship. It's like, I get to make purchases at a higher level of financial kind of impact than I probably get to do in my normal life. Like, it's the equivalent of seeing an advertisement for a Mercedes and just splashing out 100k or something on a car. That's what they're angling at when they get you to spend 200 plus on a really shiny spaceship. And that, for me, is just problematic in, like, a million different ways. And then they made a Top Gear parody trailer with awful space Clarkson, and I vomited my own esophagus out.
It's quite well observed. I mean, I vomited my esophagus out as well, but it's quite well observed in terms of its Clarksonisms and its Top Gearisms as well, and the way it's shot and the cadence, the speech.
And the sort of almost Allman Brothers-y kind of noodly guitar. But it's awful. And I get that people like Top Gear, that's fine, I don't like it, but I'm not going to get into that. But it's like, well, apart from just being cringy, it's again selling that fantasy of, like, Top Gear is an entertainment show about things that are real, ultimately, right? Like, you might not ever own one of the cars in it, so you watch some guys thrash them around a track. And it's kind of benign, because the point is you don't really get to own these, but you pay your license fee so you can watch Top Gear. Whereas in Star Citizen, it is selling those cars, and it's, the spaceships, and it's like the Steam curation things. Buying things can't really be just a bit of fun, or else your game is shit. That's a shitty game. That takes away people's ability to eat. That's a rubbish game. I don't want to play that game.
We've got a real problem with debt in our society.
We do.
And, advertising does encourage you to pay more than you can actually afford. And you look at these, like you say, luxury car adverts. It's not just a nice luxury car, it's the luxury life that goes around it. A beautiful woman, a beautiful home, driving around in a beautiful bit of scenery, Hugh Laurie in the front of the car saying, be who you're meant to be, kissing a woman that's not his wife, and then driving off to end the advert, that kind of thing. And, encourage, it's wish fulfillment, to strive above your means. And Star Citizen is that the video game?
Yeah. And that's the thing, is in real life, I mean, obviously there are some people who are going to get caught up in it and really believe that life exists and is waiting for them if they only buy this car. And that's called a midlife crisis in real life. There's a name for that. That entire process of, this purchase will help me, oh God, what have I done? But, there's a sort of common cultural understanding that it is a bit of a fantasy. Whereas, because Star Citizen is a game, and specifically a game that doesn't exist yet, there's the chance that the life can be real, like the promise is somehow slightly more insidious, because the promise is that they're building that life for you, and it's coming soon, and it's going to have ground PvP and space PvP, and you're able to walk in the cities and talk to the aliens, and maybe you can live there, and you can marry an alien maybe, and just live in the asteroid base that you spent $80 on for some reason, and it'll be like, you won't have to go to work the next day because you'll live in space now, and it's a really big, it's like the fucking dream of video games, right? Like, all video games come back to, will we live in space one day eventually? And I don't know, I love that. I mean, I like spaceship video games as much, if not more, than most people, but something about watching that dream get kind of bent into a kind of, if that promise is broken, it's like the worst collective midlife crisis gaming has ever had.
But do you think, like, part of me wonders if that's just okay that's what the thing is. Because I wonder if, like, would it be better if they didn't actually ever make the game? Would it be better if...
We just all buy into the fantasy.
Yeah, and we are literally buying into the fantasy. We make it real with the money that we invest in it, and you just get to enjoy it in yourself in your own head, knowing that you own this fish tank that's on your spaceship.
Isn't that how cults work?
A little bit.
As in, we've all agreed this is going to be real because it makes us feel better to believe it, so let's just all keep putting money in.
It's a Ponzi scheme, isn't it?
Yes. But those eventually...
Let's not say anything we can't take back.
No.
Like, cults exploit people in a way which is ultimately much more harmful than Star Citizen is ever likely to be.
True.
And
I'm not saying there's a causal...
investment in expensive luxury cars hurts people more than Star Citizen is ever likely to, because a luxury car costs 14 grand in Alb, whereas $200, yeah, it's expensive for a digital item, but in the grand scheme of things, isn't. So,
I think it makes me uncomfortable that it is aping the structures of some really kind of pretty, not exploitative, what do I mean? Sort of pernicious trends in marketing and lifestyle and aspiration and the kind of things. Like, it's turning what should be an exciting fantasy that games can give you access to, which is, the open world space game, into a deeply and monetized, We had a question, I don't know if we'll get around to answering it, but we had a question that asked, that was concerned that all online games recreated the structures of real life in games in a way that single-player games didn't. So you weren't being given the opportunity to succeed, you had to kind of pay to proceed, or you're always being reminded of how much more someone else had than you in an MMO or whatever. I don't necessarily agree with that point in all cases. I totally agree with it when it comes to Star Citizen. That it is recreating shitty structures from real life, such as how much can you afford to spend, what kind of lifestyle can you buy yourself, how much is your investment actually worth.
Isn't that Dota as well?
Well,
with time rather than money, particularly.
In what way?
Because with its endless amount of learning that you can do, it's a game in which the attraction of putting more hours into it is so that you know more than the people who are a tier below you, right?
It's to compete at a higher level, which is not the same thing.
No, I don't think the motivations are the same, but I think it creates a similar kind of treadmill that you're constantly scrabbling up in order to kind of meet the expectations of people who are on that slightly higher tier than you.
Well, okay, I think that's true of all competitive games. I think competition has that quality, and that's one of the reasons they're attractive. Is that's why people say games are sport, because they fully mirror the process of having to learn and deal with all the psychological stresses of learning and improving and losing and winning and getting better. That's a one-to-one link between a structure from real life and a structure from games, and that's a positive thing because competition is great. It has its own criteria. One of the reasons competition is great is because it is essentially meritocratic. It's one of the reasons it's very important that Dota sells nothing that would give you any kind of benefit in that competition. The whole, this guy's got more than me translates to a fancy wizard hat that has no bearing on his ability to compete in the game, right? Like, it is meritocratic. Who has the biggest spaceship? Or there's many games like this. I don't want to just pick on Star Citizen. That's not meritocratic. That is directly translating who has more money in real life into an in-game, very palpable expansion of what they can achieve or go off and do. And yes, it would be possible to earn things, etc. But by having that be the kind of the threshold you are.
The question does equate money and time, though, and does bring that up in terms of, because it's partly meritocratic and stuff like Dota or stuff that's time sensitive, but not everyone is as time rich as some other people. And so it's never a level playing field completely. It's never purely meritocratic.
Well, no, but, I mean,
it's just unavoidable, I think, is the thing.
Time for me is like, it has to be sort of considered as this kind of constant thing that is fair, because, I mean, it's not, yes, okay, you're not going to probably be a pro Dota player if you're just starting now and you have a full-time job, right? Like, that's, yes, okay, life's unfair in that way, but, I don't know, for me, I mean, maybe it is equivalent. For me, it just doesn't feel equivalent to, I've got a decent amount of space on my credit card, I can skip ahead in this game, or I can sort of lord it up over other players because I have this amazing thing straight away. Like, I don't know.
I think in both of those games have been intentionally designed as sinks for different kinds of commodities. And Dota is explicitly designed to sop up time, because you require to learn a large amount of data, and then that data shifts with every patch. And so it's constantly trying to encourage people to be continuously learning and continuously putting time.
I don't think that's the intent of the game. I think saying consciously designed that way, I think that's interesting. I think that's why it appealed to Valve. I think that's probably one of the reasons they brought it in-house, is because it's this amazing, it draws people into Steam as a platform because it does soak up time. I think the fact that it soaks up time is a byproduct of developing a competitive game, and competitive games need constant updates and revival. Like, by preventing the game from being solved, which we've discussed before, you prolong the amount of time people invest in it. But that's not why you prevent it from being solved. You prevent it from being solved to maintain the competitive dynamic which is that sort of onward journey, right? Like, it's, you don't want people to get to the point where the game is just done, because that's not really possible with any competitive.
How do you feel about games which cross the streams? Because there's a lot of games which justify their microtransactions and the ability to buy experience in that it's providing a more level playing field for friends to play together, because the person who's maybe not time rich but is money rich can still play with their friends who are money poor but time rich.
So, it's kind of like the territory that I wasn't kind of like that kind of middle hinterland of free to play, such almost a different topic, because it is its own thing. Like, that's why I said that in the majority of cases, I don't necessarily agree that creating those kinds of imbalances between people is always bad for the game. It does depend on the game, but it's all to do with degree, surely. Like, when you're looking at maybe a £3 a month subscription to get some, 50% XP boosters in whatever free to play game you're talking about, you're not really talking about people probably won't pause too long before they make that decision, right? Like, it's in the realms of disposable income. It's when games start to reach beyond what's considered disposable income or time. The reason my friends don't play Dota is because it stretches out of the field of what they would consider to be disposable time, right? Whereas, for me, Star Citizen is stretching way beyond what I see as acceptable in terms of disposable income, right? It's money that I just can't fathom spending on something. And so maybe this is me being blind to other people's perspectives on it, but for me, that's like, I can pay a couple of different subscriptions a month, Netflix, console, online services, Spotify, whatever, and sort of comfortable with it and don't really feel like I'm being exploited in that way and have all these ancillary costs. And gaming is sort of draining my money in that way. But when you're looking at investment levels of money, and you can say that, yeah, $200 isn't going to bankrupt somebody, but it is stretching into a price point for goods that maybe I'm just being soft, but it's stretching out of what you can reliably say sort of like caveat emptor to, because people can get caught up in the hype and in the promise of something, and when something is so unproven, I don't know, it feels like it just, the whole thing feels sort of fucked.
Yeah.
To me.
Yeah, I agree. I wouldn't go near that game with a barge pole.
I'd love it to be good.
When it's released, I'll have a very short barge pole. I'll be poking it repeatedly.
I'd love it to be good, and I'd love to spend £30 to play it. And it's, that's the point, really, right? What have you been playing, Graham?
I've been playing Brigador. Brigador, that's what it's called.
Brigadier?
No, Brigador.
What's a Brigador?
I don't know, it's like a Matador, and I know that because the game used to be called Matador, and then they changed it to Brigador, which is
because they have different ranks of people who fight bulls. Is a Brigador just one up from Matador or something?
I guess so. Or maybe one down. I don't know.
Sorry, I should probably explain what the game is before I interrupt. Nonsense.
Not really.
Well, they did want us to say the names of the games more often.
Brigador.
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 Brigador is
fun to say.
an isometric mech combat game.
Oh.
Not nothing to do with bullfighting. And it's not. It's basically, there was a whole bunch of games in the early 90s which were inspired by Blade Runner and Aliens, as many games are now, but also I think more Judge Dredd and RoboCop and kind of darker, gorier fare. And the Amiga was full of this in the late 80s and early 90s. Stuff like Syndicate, where it's all synth soundtracks, cities at night, ultra-violence. And that's what Brigador is. Brigador is that game made modernized, essentially. And that the story is that it's set in a city whose great leader has just died, and you have a single night to basically overthrow the government of that city, take control of it. So you get dropped in a section of the city, it's isometrics perspective, really hyper-detailed pixel art, really crisp, sort of like Syndicate's perspective. It's pixel art, but to the point where I struggle to describe it because it's so detailed that you don't see the pixels. It's just...
Isn't that just 3D art?
But it's there's something really crisp about the lines and the individual bits of detail on, you're moving through these cities at night, which are all made out of cargo containers or debris and junkyards and stuff like that, or it's very industrialized, so it's kind of got a feeling of kind of Command and Conquer Red Alert style stuff in terms of some of the machinery. Or there was a game, Factorio. Did any of your kids play that? So that's similar sort of thing, like hyper crisp 2D art. And you're moving through this city with the objective of destroying a couple of buildings or just killing all the people in it. And you do that with your mech. And at the start, you've got like 8 or 9 mechs to choose from, some of which are huge, really tall, stompy, put 2 different cannons on the front of them, shoot over the top of buildings, really visible from far around so all the enemies can see you. Or you can go for something that's much smaller, that can hide behind buildings, that runs quieter, that hovers so its footsteps don't stomp, stomp, stomp and alert everyone around you. And you can play it stealthily, and you can try and avoid people and avoid patrols and that sort of stuff. And then the game becomes about just either the stealth of it or the combat of it. And it's not finished yet. It's not even an alpha yet. It's just a preview build I've been playing. And so there are problems with AI and that sort of stuff. But it's really satisfying ultra-violence at this point of like stomping around as this giant robot coming across little like machine gun dudes that see you and run away as soon as they see you because you're so fucking big, or if you're in a little smaller one, they'll maybe try and take you on for a bit and mowing them down. Or fighting against other mechs and tanks in this arena. It's not turn-based or anything, it's all, proper action, WSD, running around and that sort of stuff. And controlling your 2 different cannons, one of which is normally locked to the position of your legs, one of which can swivel freely. And it's super cool. Basically. It is the game that when I was 7 or 8 years old playing Walker by DMA Design on the Amiga, which was like a 2D mech combat game, which had little guys that would try and grapple up you and stuff like that. You would constantly mowing them down with your machine gun. It's the game that when I was 8 years old that I would want to be playing now. It's got a really great electronic soundtrack by a band called Makeup and Vanity Set as well, which is on Bandcamp, which we'll put in the show notes.
Sounds rad.
It's fucking great. It's just cool. Like, I don't have that much to say about it. It's just really cool.
Mechs are cool.
Mechs are cool.
Other game I've been playing, it's less cool, a bit more nerdy. It's all nerdy, really. Other game I've been playing is Sim Hero, which someone mentioned in the comments on RPS, which is a mashup of RPG and management sim. Kind of sports management. And that you are a guy who's been exiled to an island and you're building a little village. You place down a tent, and then you live in it. You place down a couple more tents, top-down perspective. Place down a couple more tents, the villagers move in. Put like a way rest tent, and heroes will come to town and move in. And then what you can do is you can send those heroes on adventures. You choose their equipment, give them weapons, that sort of stuff. Pick a party makeup, and then tell them to go off to the dungeon that's in the east. You don't then see what happens or controls what happens. You just wait for a little while, and then they come back, and you get like the combat reports of what happened when they're away. And you read through the combat reports and see that, they got to level 8 of the dungeon, they didn't defeat the boss, but you can see all the fights against goblins and stuff like that they were killing. And then you send them off again, change their equipment, send them off and try and get them further. And then sometimes they'll come back and one of them's died, because you screwed up your management beforehand. So it's kind of like Football Manager in that you're picking your teams beforehand, setting their stats and that sort of stuff, and then sending them off. And as they successfully clear out dungeons, you unlock new buildings, which you then ties into the little town management part of the game.
Sounds fucking great.
Yeah. So you get the ability, you find a lodge house or whatever, and now you can tell some of your villagers to be hunters, and you've got them off chopping down wood and stuff like that, because you need the wood and other materials in order to build some of these buildings. And the expansion of your city is always tied to developing these parties, managing their equipment and sending them off. And I've always really loved that in games, that thing of setting things in motion and then either just watching the results, as in gratuitous space battles or Football Manager, or something like Dwarf Fortress, which It's a very simple interaction of take this little symbol, tell it to go attack this other little symbol, and then you just get the combat log, which is really detailed descriptions of its granular wounding system, the phrase that you came up with, Marsh, of all the ways you're hacking into the enemy creatures. And Sim Hero isn't as detailed as that in the combat reports. It's much more JRPG-ish. I think it's partly inspired by a Final Fantasy game, Final Fantasy management game from years and years ago. And it's just really great. It's really compelling. And it was kickstarted late last year. I think they asked for like $800 and they got $4,000 or something. But there is a freely available beta of it now, which is available even if you didn't back it, because I didn't back it. You just go to the Sim Hero website. We'll link it in the show notes, and you can download it, and it's good. It's good already.
Sounds a little bit like Recettear. Did you play Recettear? That was on running a shop.
Yeah.
It's got the same thing of sending people off with various equipment, though.
Yeah, sending them off into dungeons to try and find your equipment to sell in your store, wasn't it? Yeah.
Recettear?
I have no idea how you pronounce it.
I think it was Recettear. Recettear, an Item Shop's Tale.
Yeah.
Which was a Japanese Dujin game. It's a Japanese indie game, basically, that then got picked up by Carpe Fulgur, who are an American company that do translations of Japanese indie games into English. And they do really good translations, so it's really funny. You
it's very good.
Run your little RPG store, selling goods to the heroes that travel through before they go off on their adventures.
I think the name is supposed to sound like Recettear, like as in like a receipt you get from a shop, and the act of tearing the receipt. I think that's actually what
Recettear?
Recettear. Like, I think that's what it's about. Maybe I made that up.
Don't know.
That's what I always saw it as.
It was really good though. Carpe Fulgur have done a couple of other translations since, but they've been of much harder and more impenetrable JRPG stuff, more traditionally hard, grindy things. But Recettear is just really light, really funny, really good.
Where can you get Sim Hero from?
We'll put a link in the show notes. I can't remember the name of the company, but because it's not paid for and it's not finished, it's basically just a download, 150 megabytes from the dude's website. It's just one guy making it, I think.
Sounds rad.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
You're cool.
You're cooler, Marsh. What have you been playing?
I've played 48 minutes of the Masterplan, which is on Steam Early Access. I would have played more, but it kept on crashing fatally for the first few attempts. But they seemed to have patched whatever bug was killing the game. It is a top-down heist game with a squad that you control individually. You can put things in slow motion, so you have more time to kind of fine-tune what you're doing, who you're holding up, which doors you're kind of trying to break through, while the guard's looking the other way. And it actually feels a lot... Remember Introversion were making...
Subversion,
which feels a lot very similar in terms of their pitch, and they abandoned that project because they were never quite able to make it enjoyable. But it's great. It looks really nice. It's extremely kind of unusual art style. Very, very chunky, big characters. Not terribly useful in terms of being able to see the entire scope of a level in one go. And I don't know whether that feels like an intentional thing or whether that's just they just like drawing things big because they look cool. But I think it looks cool enough to excuse that. You kind of you assemble a crew and then you rock up in a van outside. There's 4 levels currently in the early access build, which is well worth buying, I think, at this stage of completion. Because there's lots and lots of ways you can complete them, but 4 levels have an escalating stakes and escalating difficulty. The first one's just like a news agent. You can go in and there's I think there's only 2. There's like a customer there. If the customer spots you, you have like a timer when you get spotted doing something wrong, and the game's quite clever about what it decides is naughty and what isn't. But if you get caught behind the counter, for example, in the shop, or trying to open a door you shouldn't be opening, then the customers will run outside and go to the nearest phone and phone the police, at which point you have like 30 seconds to escape. But you can do it by just stealthing it, by picking your moments to kind of slip past people that are looking the other way. Or you can hold people up and then you can send one of your other men to punch them repeatedly into the face until they fall asleep. And then you can take their snoozing forms and dump them in a back alley where they won't be spotted by anybody else. And there's other things like cameras, and it has a really nice... I don't think I've seen this actually in a stealth game before, where cameras are linked up to specific televisions, and you're not automatically detected if you do something terrible in front of a camera. But if somebody's watching the television, then they'll see you do that, and then they'll catch you.
That is how cameras actually work.
I know, but it's really enjoyable. I managed to clean out the first 2 levels pretty well. Felt very proud of myself earlier without being spotted. I only had to hold up and punch one guy to oblivion. But then the later levels, I have no idea how you do them. They just seem fucking impossible. There are so many guards. Most civilians you can hold up and then you just bludgeon them with another character because you can't punch them while you're holding them up with a gun, which feels a bit weird. Because they have their level of intimidation slowly drops over a period of time, and then they'll attack you or they'll run away, regardless of whether they're held up or not. But guards just seem to have a massive health pool, so you just punching them, and then they stop being intimidated, and they just fucking beat you up.
That doesn't seem like how punching someone works.
It doesn't seem how punching somebody who's holding a gun to your head should work. But I guess it kind of makes sense. It means that you do actually have to orchestrate your team very carefully to have people in the right place in order to punch people, to team up on people to punch them, and then to have somebody pick up the body and take it outside.
Is the intimidation like a general stat, or is it tied to the person who's doing the intimidating?
See, I don't know, actually.
Like if you had a gun pointed to someone, then they realise this guy's not going to shoot me, and they run away, can you then catch them with another person with a gun?
Well, the characters do have different properties. I've not explored this in the 4 levels. There doesn't seem much of an opportunity to explore it. In the trailer, you see that one it pitches it as a kind of, like a proper kind of filmic crew. So each character is presented in the trailer, at least, as having a specific role. I don't know if that carries through specifically to mechanics, but there's one guy in the trailer who's able to dress up as other people, and it seems to be very heavily implied in the trailer that seems to be his skill. I couldn't see a way of doing that in the game, so maybe that's something to come in a later patch. But certainly that seems to imply that certain characters would probably be more intimidating.
What's the structure? Well, or the planned structure to link those missions? Or
so you have a hideout. I don't know how that plays into kind of your resource management. I assume it will at some stage. It appears it's currently just there as a tutorial level to explain how you interact with things. Which is that you click on things to set waypoints and your character moves towards them. You can chain waypoints by holding down shift. And you can rotate your character on the spot by kind of clicking him and then dragging with one of the mouse buttons, I forget which. But I assume that's going to become somewhere where you stash items, and then that's probably where you equip your team before heading out on a heist. Only when I head out on a heist, you jump in a car and it goes to a map, and there's all these different kind of Polaroid pictures of the places you go stuck to it. A bit like Payday 2's way of navigation.
I've been following the development. I haven't played it, but I've followed the development blog a little bit.
Oh, right.
And yeah, I think that's exactly how it's going to work, and that your HQ becomes a place that you stash the goods that you steal.
So it's XCOM, basically, but with crime.
Yeah, and then you put together your crews before you go off. Because a lot of the early videos they showed were obviously riffing on ideas of Ocean's 11, putting together a squad, everyone having a particular role. I always wish more games would have bases. I want, like, Batman's lair with a giant penny in it.
The Batcave.
Yes. The Batcave. With all these mementos of his life.
His
He was
Bat-penny.
Batman's. Yeah.
I want someone to make a turn-based crime strategy game about building a base and doing heists where you play a man or a woman rebuilding their criminal empire having been incarcerated, and it should be called XCOM.
Very good.
There you
Very
go.
good.
That's a pun, so it has to happen now. That's how that works.
Did you actually want to say anything about
Elite?
Elite,
Yeah, I did actually. I really need to get sidetracked onto my fears about the, late market capitalism and Star Citizen rather than talk about the fun video game I've been playing. Well, I should stress, had been playing. I played So Elite's getting a big new update next week, which is kind of expanding it in a bunch of interesting ways, which I'll talk about in a sec. I played the current version, probably for about 20 hours, which I think is probably when you start to hit the upper limits of having kind of, if not seen everything, because there's a decent amount to see and do, sort of had all of the interactions you can currently have. But the thing that impressed me about it is a kind of full playable version of Elite, even in its, very beta form. And we should say, actually, this is the 30th anniversary of Elite this week, I think. So it's topical in a sense as well. But they've succeeded in one particular way that then ripples up through the entire design of the game in a way that makes, you know how we've talked in the podcast in the past about fun boredom, like the kind of the little things you just like to do, the European truck simulators and whatever, where you just go through the motions, but you like doing it because your brain likes doing that. Elite's got a bit of that to it, right? When you're trading, working up to get your next big ship or whatever, flying between systems, you are fundamentally playing space European truck simulator. Like, that's kind of what it is. What it has that maybe acts as a counterpoint to that fun boredom thing is absolutely incredible presentation at almost every level. Like, so from when you boot into the game after that first loading screen, wherever possible, the game kind of works overtime to make you feel like you're in that world, even without an Oculus Rift on. With the Oculus Rift, it's kind of amazing, especially the new one. To make you feel like you're in that world, and also to reward you for paying attention to details. It's not a game that it doesn't sort of almost need to, and eventually they promise to let you walk out of the ship and walk around space stations and the rest of that stuff. It almost doesn't need that, because your sense of your character's kind of contiguous experience, which is a big part of the space fantasy, I think. You know, not having the load screens, always feeling like you're always experiencing what they're experiencing is a surprisingly key part of, I think, how these games function, how their fiction functions, is why I think Eve worked so hard to establish the lore of the universe, LORE, in a way that let the player feel like they were the pilot of the ship, you know, but not, you know, they came up with a fictional reason why you see the ships in third person in Eve, and that was to sustain that fantasy of having this totally kind of one-to-one experience with the pilot of your ship. That's what Elite is about, but in a more kind of traditional terrestrial way, where all the UI is inside the world. It's not UI that you pull up. And there's little touches that really make that. So I want to start with the little touches, because it really is where the core of that game comes from. So when you dock, when you fly into a space station, you be assigned a bay, and you rotate, and you find your bay, and you land in it, hopefully smoothly. When you do that on your way in, you'll see all the kind of amazing details on those space stations. Like it's like the inside of the space station is like the drum of a washing machine, because the station is rotating to create artificial gravity. And around the inside of the drum are highways, which presumably how the cargo gets delivered from the cargo bay where you'll dock to the station, whatever happens to it after that. And there are trucks driving down those roads. And it's the weirdest little thing to have, because they are basically trucks, like you'd understand them, but but they're driving around a circular road on the inside of a ring. And it's that little touch of kind of like the really believable with the totally kind of out there and futuristic is really, really nice. Like your goods don't get beamed away or kind of picked up by a space crane or something. They, you know, that guy drives a truck. That guy's literally driving a truck, and I'm driving my space truck. Then when you land and you dock, your kind of ship gets locked into place. And you can choose at that point to go down a little lift, have your ship turned around and backed into a hangar, which is where you need to go if you want to change any of the fittings on your ship, for example. This is mega basic stuff. However, if all you want to do is buy and load new cargo or check the bulletin board for missions or any of that stuff, you just load up you just connect to the station's computer, and that brings up a new menu of options.
Which you do by looking to your left, right?
You look down for the station computer when you connect. And it does this kind of connecting window where your loading bar comes up and it says like, welcome to wherever. And cool. If this is the tiniest thing to get fixated on, you can load the ship computer and do another action with your ship at the same time, because they are parallel bits of technology. So if you want to like hit the button to go down the lift into the station and boot up the computer at the same time, you do both. And this is such a strange thing to get, maybe it is strange to get caught up on this, but like, that sells something that very, very few games do. And I don't think I've ever encountered a game that does that, which is allow you to treat the technology in the world like you would real technology. Like, doing that feels like looking at your phone while, I don't know, like, making soup. I don't know, that was a bad analogy. Like, games don't usually let you multitask in a kind of breezy way. And so that one little touches like that, where you kind of like breezily flip between a few different tasks at once. Like, you're actually sat at your desk in your ship, kind of with multiple tabs open, kind of managing things. Most games don't do that. Menus are up or they're down. You're using one thing or using another thing. That tiny little detail sells the entire world for me. Like, that moment where you kind of like, because it adds a tiny degree of flair to the simple act of like docking, landing, going down into the hangar, bringing up, doing the bulletin board things. Like, you feel like the first time you do it, you find out what all the buttons do. Then by the 50th time you do it, and you will do it a million fucking times, because you do it twice in every trade route you'll ever do, you get that moment where you land, immediately call up the ship, the station computer, and your ship is already being rotated into place in the dock, and it feels like, I don't really necessarily need to get out of the ship chair at that point and go walk around the station, because it feels like the little mundane details of real life kind of seep into the game in a way that's very specific to the game, and it kind of creates this kind of really powerful sense of place. So you have that, and that sustains a game that is currently like fairly broad in terms of the things you can encounter. Like, you can find capital ships under attack and help them out. You can hunt bounties, NPC or player. You can, fight in various different combat zones, trade extensively over like 50 systems or something like that. Earn bigger ships, and there's a decent number of ships for a game of this type. So it's fairly complete in that way. What I'm really excited about next for the game, so it's getting bigger. It's going up to, I think it's getting in an additional 500 systems, and new ships and new exploration stuff and mechanics. And I think the next patch will also have more robust ship customization, so things you can previously fiddle with and tune. That's all great. But honestly, one of the things that I think, one of the reasons that I've been in a position, I think, to recommend Elite now, or at least now that it's kind of the pricing is coming down to, I think it's like £40 now, or it's getting there.
I think it's 50 at the moment.
It's 50 if you want the playable version, but you can pre-order the...
Oh yeah, if you can pre-order it.
Like 30
35.
Yeah. So it's in game price range now. The reason I think I'm comfortable recommending it is a lot of the promise of that game, like the kind of incredible things you can imagine happening, are currently only not really possible due to like a few server architecture problems and a few very basic features where you can see the holes for them, but they feel sort of imminent, like players being able to hire each other for missions, like in Eve is something they're planning, and that sounds like it's a perfect fix. You already have the bulletin board system. You already have, players doing missions. It's only a step beyond that to, I want to hire someone to escort me or whatever. That stuff, when it's got better, matchmaking. Anyone who watched the PC Gamer stream of Elite will have seen why that went wrong for us. And it went wrong because the game doesn't always match two players into the same instance of a particular part of space. And that can make it very hard to find each other. But that one simple thing is really the only thing currently standing between the game and like proper, really interesting kind of emergent happenings as players encounter each other in space and chase each other from sector to sector. And it's got what I always look for in early access games. I think I remember talking about this when I talked about not Deep Space Nine, Space-based DF9.
Oh yeah.
Which has now been, I think, sort of like put on ice.
They're finishing it up, basically.
Yeah.
So it's into beta now, and version 1.0 very shortly after they jettisoned a whole bunch of possibly features that they were planning before.
Well, that game was really bad when it came onto early access. Like, it wasn't ready, and it didn't have like a core loop that allowed you to see where it was going, and that's where Elite has just gotten to, or at least in the last last month or so, that's where Elite has arrived. Where it's like, this is fully complete in terms of like the kind of themes and structures of this game, and it's interesting and it can sustain your attention for a long time. And at the moment it's much smaller than it's going to be, and you do run out of things, but it's at that perfect point where when they add stuff, it will then spiral out into sort of exponentially more stories. So that great part where like any game with really good solid basic mechanics, basic vocabulary can then just have kind of ideas added to it that become a story for somebody. Like the next patch is adding a special kind of missile. Like, it's adding dumbfire missiles. Everything is currently homing in the game. but then a special kind of homing missile that requires the enemy's shields to be down, but isn't lethal. And what it does is it latches onto the back of their ship, like a tracking device, hacks their computer, and tries to open their cargo bay in space. So they just start, like, pooing their cargo out behind them. And it's basically it's a missile designed for non-lethal pirates. Like, you can chase, because picking up cargo is really skill-based in Elite. You have to open your cargo bay and, like, fly at it and catch it in, like, a kind of, basically a cargo funnel. So if someone forcibly jettisons your cargo for you, you're probably not going to be able to turn around unless you can fight them. But that itself, like, so it's a cool idea, but the game is that kind of healthy state now where just adding something like that is kind of immediately exciting. And that's, I think, really positive. I'm really kind of excited to see what they do with it. Because, yeah, it actually exists.
One of the next patch is coming on September 30th.
Yes,
just a week away at the time we're recording this. And one of the things that's in it is smaller outposts for out-of-the-way galaxies, which they describe as being roadside cafes, which is just immediately evocative, because I love the idea of being a space trucker, basically.
Have you seen the designs for them?
No.
They look, they're, sorry. Like, this is one of the, I think maybe says everything. I get a lot of fucking newsletters, from games, especially games in development, and games I've backed or whatever. The Elite newsletter is the one I read, because every newsletter has a cool space thing in it. But yeah, so they show off new station designs all the time. Some of them are beautiful, like huge, space stations with cool docking mechanisms. These new tiny ones, you don't go inside them. They're so small, you land on the surface of them, like on the exterior. And so they might only have like 3 parking spaces, and then literally like a pub. And they're just sort of like, they're in slow orbit around stars and things. And the idea is that the game will sort of simulate the expansion of civilization out into further reaches of space. And so in the furthest reaches, if you find any stations, you'll find these little ones. And then there are like exploration stations, then into Rome. And then you'll find the more sort of robust city stations closer to the center of civilization. But that's a kind of mega cool, like, when a game sells its sense of place that well, the idea of just sort of like docking on the side of something that's just sort of rotating in space and just having a look around is really nice. Also, the Elite Rift DK2 integration is insane. Like, there's something very, very odd about walking around the bridge of one of those ships, looking out the windows.
The reason I want to be able to get out of my spaceship is walk around the stations. It's because I want to go to the space pub.
Yeah.
And hang out in the space bar. I quite like it even if it was just a checkbox on the menu or something, to turn on a survival mode where you have to eat. I would like that.
Yeah, but I think the important thing is that they haven't promised that at all, and the game doesn't really need it. Like, I think that's what I was trying to say, is that, like, there's a tendency with the space fantasy to see one part of it work and then immediately spiral out into every other thing that could mean, right? That's when you get the kind of like, that's kind of where the walking in stations cliche comes from, because it's like, but what if you could get out of the spaceship and have another life and play a different game? And ultimately you want that, but you actually want them to really nail the feel of being in a spaceship. And I don't think any game has done the feel of being in a spaceship better than Elite Dangerous. Like, it's absolutely, like, way ahead of most of them, just in terms of how everything feels and sounds. Like when the canopy breaks, if you get in combat, if your canopy breaks and like your character's helmet seals, and you've got a limited oxygen span in your suit at that point, but the sound goes because the simulated sound inside the cockpit is broken. Like that stuff is rad. Like, I remember actually, so when I was at Gamescom, I played it through with the Rift DK2, and I was in a Lakon Type 9, which is a huge sort of transport ship, but it can be used as a gunboat, and it has a massive sort of glass dome for a cockpit, basically, with the pilot seat. So it sits in the middle of, so you can look down and be looking through a window. And the way Elite's UI works as part of the world is the things you're seeing, targeting information and so on, are kind of like being projected into the glass that you're looking through. So whatever the technology is, holograms or something, you are seeing something kind of showing up on a transparent piece of glass. When the panes of glass break, the UI only breaks where the glass is broken. So if you can so this sort of makes sense, because you're imagining yourself looking through you've got multiple windows to look through. If one window breaks, if you can angle the other one, you can get the targeting information you need by looking at your target through the window that's still in place. And it's details like that. And that's down to like the shards of glass as well. So, you see someone pass through the shards of glass. You'll see a flicker as the hologram tries to sort of attach and then loses it because the glass is broken. Like, it's shit like that sells it. Like, that is, because people who really care about spaceship video game Fantasyland do so to the extent that that's the experience you want. You don't, the grand scope of the thing is fine, but you want that feeling of like, oh shit, I'm actually here. And
also, speaking of microtransaction stuff, to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the game, they added a skin for the Cobra Mark III, which mimics the wireframe of the original Elite. So it's got like white lines along
it's a black ship with white lines along certain parts of its hull, so it
sort of looks polygonal, basically, like the original wireframe model. They've also made the original Elite free. You can download it for free from the Elite store. Which is cool.
Game's good. Really looking forward to seeing where they go with it.
Yeah. Shall we do questions from questions?
Yeah. Why not?
Dear Creighton Crowbar, just finished listening to your most excellent recent podcast when I came upon an omission. When speaking about how The Sims 4 failed to entertain in the long term, you spoke briefly and commiserated as a group that there are no other games quite like The Sims. I felt that this ignored the obvious answer, Dwarf Fortress, which is, at its core, is a game about keeping a group of drunken, bearded craftsmen and women happy, and rather than being a shrine of consumerism like The Sims, is a game where all the fine furnishings that your dwarves use is made and embellished by them. I would love to hear your thoughts on this comparison. It has helped win people over to playing it in the past. And any other games you feel have their own unlikely comparisons outside the expected genre. I agree with this comparison. The thing I like about The Sims is the little anecdotes you get from the personal drama, and Dwarf Fortress, for all its obvious fantasy theme and war and simulated history and all that stuff, is ultimately just about a very small group of people living in a small, cramped space together, getting on each other's nerves, falling in love, mourning one another's deaths, hating each other. Like it simulates it down to that level, and that's the level that I'm much more interested in. So I play it for quite a similar reason to playing The Sims.
It is a good comparison. I do feel like the accessibility angle has to be addressed, though, because it does feel a little bit like, you enjoyed Enid Blyton. Have you tried Tolstoy?
There's a little bit of that, for sure. But, I've argued before that Dwarf Fortress isn't as hard to play as people think it is. It is definitely harder than The Sims, though.
I think Sims gives people ready access to that level of kind of creativity, but if nowhere near the depth of simulation or the kind of intricacy of the story that can come from that. Like, I was playing a little bit of The Sims 4 last night, again, actually, just to play with the house building stuff, because it's really good. Like, you are limited by your ability to kind of come up with interesting designs for homes, not by a tool set that's obtuse in really any way. It's just arrows that you drag about, and you can place little chairs. It looks nice, right? Like, I would play the hell out. I've still never committed the time that Dwarf Fortress requires. I would definitely play a game that existed somewhere between those two, which I think maybe was what I'm lamenting when I say, why aren't there any more games like this? I do acknowledge the existence of Dwarf Fortress. It's more that I kind of want somebody to make that middle zone. Yeah. Maybe sacrifice a little bit of Dwarf Fortress's depth even, but gain that I can maybe spend half an hour learning this and then play it.
Yeah, I would like to take Dwarf Fortress's simulation on that level and set it in a suburban house first of all, so that you don't, because part of what makes Dwarf Fortress daunting is that you can sink hundreds of hours into it and then just basically lose everything as you unleash hell beasts, or as the elves get fucked off at you for cutting down too many trees or something like that. So losing is fun, but that is part of what's really intimidating about it. And then, obviously the interface stuff. But it would be nice to take some of Dwarf Fortress's individual simulations and just pair it on a smaller scale where it was more manageable. Jamie writes, if you could turn any game into a pet, what animal would it be, and how would it behave? This is a good question.
It is a really good question, but a really hard question. I think Dota would be a cat that doesn't like you.
I maybe Sonic All-Stars Racing, and it would be Quokka, just kind of...
Oh, well, this dumpy, weird...
Yeah, well, it looks
birds.
like it's smiling the whole time. It's kind of joyful.
Or a Labrador. Something sort of desperate to please you, wagging its tail, just happy that you loaded it. There's another game I bought on a Steam sale, never played.
You should play it, it's good. It's good if you like karting games.
Do you like karting? Marty, did you have a thought for this?
I did, but I completely forgot what it was. I actually committed like 10 minutes to thinking of an answer to this earlier. It's gone. It's gone. Never mind.
Oh well.
Most, Facebook games would be like stick insects or sea monkeys or something. They don't really care that you're there. You don't really care that they're there, but you sort of feel a vague obligation to make sure it hasn't died.
Yep. Alex writes, "Hello, fellow cargo commanders. I'm in the middle of a Minecraft resurgence with my partner at the moment. I'm running a server of my own in a new world, and after creating the standard mud huts and houses, we're in the middle of a large project of building a giant castle. Now, as I'm running the server, I have the full command line at my fingers. I can just generate all the materials I need. I don't, however, as I feel that would ruin the Minecraft experience. I want this castle to be a real project, to have crafted each element ourselves. However, when it's night time and we're getting attacked, I'll happily reset the server to daytime in order to stop us being bothered, while refusing to change the difficulty to peaceful to keep the experience real. When do you accept cheating as okay or not okay? In your view, if you're going to cheat, should you just go the whole hog, and my half method is just me kidding myself that it's okay when it's not? What do you think, Alex?
I think you've probably found the correct equilibrium by yourself. You probably don't need our say-so. You seem quite content with the balance you struck. I think I've got more okay with cheating as time's gone on. And I tend to find that I find the right level just naturally at which I'm happy to play games on their own terms, and when I want to play it on my own terms, it's fairly easy to switch.
Yeah, I think it's about... I have ruined experiences for myself by cheating them too much. But, like you say, you find that equilibrium. It's about maintaining the meaning of the experience. But, yeah, it sounds like Alex has managed to do that by, picking and choosing. The castle will still feel meaningful and real and earned because he mined all the resources himself. And The Sims is a good example of this, actually, because it sometimes can be a right old grind to get anywhere, especially in the earlier versions where you barely had enough time to feed yourself and piss in the toilet while also learning a skill. But you could really easily undermine the experience fully by just cheating and giving yourself a whole bunch of money so that everything became just trivially easy. You had all the time in the world, you didn't have to go to work, you could buy all the stuff, build everything, and, well, not to go back onto capitalism, but it turns out that that's just an empty experience at that point. You're no longer having the sense of reward from accomplishing stuff.
I thought about this because playing The Sims, I'm not at that point yet where I feel comfortable cheating, or I'm cheating. My entire session is defined by cheating. I'm all or nothing. I either want no cheats or to completely break it. I can't incorporate a few cheats in as part of my kind of run. I can't really do that. It just punctures it for me.
True of everything or just the Sims?
True of everything.
Oh, right.
I wouldn't be able to play Minecraft. I can't play Minecraft really. If that was my plan, I mean, he suggests this. I'm in a different way. Not to say that his approach isn't valid.
Would you look up FAQs for Dark Souls?
Yeah, but I've had to be mega careful with what I allow myself to look up. I suppose maybe that's an example where it is cheating, I suppose, but I have curated my experience of Dark Souls a little bit. To the extent that I will, the main thing, I won't look up anything to do with bosses or how you beat them or where I'm supposed to be going necessarily. I will, however, sometimes let myself ask my friends that information because it feels more natural, and the game does have a information sharing mechanic. I think the game is designed to get people talking and sharing information on how to beat things. A wiki is not really in the spirit of that because it's by its nature kind of curated and probably right. I do use, in Dark Souls' case, I use the wikis to make sure to find out if it's worth upgrading items. You know what I mean? If you find a new shield, is this one with a good upgrade path? I check that because frankly, the time sink of, I accidentally upgraded this a bunch of times and wasted shitloads of resources and it's no good.
Yeah.
I'm not really interested in that. What I was going to say about The Sims was, I've been playing a little bit more and I've been more interested in like remodeling the neighborhoods a bit, like changing things around, building different cafes and homes and things like that, and moving different families around. If you want to do that, you can build anything you want in any plot of land, but in order to move someone in, that Sim family needs to be able to afford it. And currently in the game, every Sim household when you start has a certain amount of money based on how many people are in the household, I think. Or it's 20,000. It's one of the two. And that means that if you want to, you want to create a new, like, if you want to create a family of like the, wealthy landowners that live in the corner of town, a big mansion you've built for them, you need to, and even if you don't plan on controlling them, you just want to move them in and have them be there so they appear in your other Sims, like when they're walking around, you have to cheat them a shitload of money to get them to be able to afford that house, either to build it or to move into it. And that for me always kind of punctures it a little bit. Like, I think the moment I have to reach for a command line, it sort of feels like I've broken it. But the alternative is playing a shitload of the game until those Sims have enough money. And, and I don't want to do that because that's not why I'm doing it. I'm building the neighborhood. I think the answer would be almost like difficulty settings for the Sims, where you pick the wealth level of the household going in. So if you want a mega easy time, you say, I'd like 100,000 simoleons to start off with, please. And if you want to make a hard time, you start with 5, and your guy lives in a box. Like, that would actually make the game more interesting in both directions. And even though there's functionally no difference doing that than typing in the give me 50,000 code twice, that would feel really different to me. Because that would feel like I'd set up easy house, hard house, medium house. And it would be like the game, it'd be like approved by the game in some way.
It's the difference between setting your own rows and simply breaking the pre-existing rows.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I don't think I have that problem. I think it's actually something that's changed as I got older, and I think it's parallel with my decision to read books that I enjoy. I think when I came out of university, I still had the mindset that I must read the great books.
Yeah.
And I'd slog away at these things, not enjoying them. And actually, I can read shitty, trashy novels, and that's fine. I can enjoy them, and I can put down books that I'm not enjoying and never go back to them.
Yeah, I still struggle with that a little bit actually as well.
Yeah, I still feel guilty, but I can now actually do it. I think it's the same switch. Like, I don't care as much. I guess.
I think I had that with difficulty levels. I used to play everything on at least normal and often hard, and saying, fuck it, I'm going to enjoy this experience with this particular game much more if I just put it on easy. And I just want to enjoy the story and the world and have a nice time, a breeze through it. I'm just saying, that's okay, that's fine. I can, it doesn't...
Yeah, I'm still a hard picker.
Sometimes games are better when they're hard, but a lot of games aren't. A lot of the games you're not playing it because of the combat. You just want the combat to be over with so you can have this.
Yeah, those are bad games. Like, I think if the game isn't better when it's hard, then they've done a bad game.
Yeah, but I feel this way about Mass Effect 1, and you love Mass Effect.
Yeah, I do love Mass Effect. But
combat, I don't think it's that great in the first one. It's not terrible, and it's not the primary reason I'm there.
There is stuff to the combat system at the highest levels. Like, I read on the internet that it's impossible to do the Pinnacle Station missions, the hardest ones, which is like it was the virtual reality combat DLC. It was like the most bottom of the barrel DLC missions. The hardest virtual reality combat missions are supposed to be almost impossible with a character that doesn't have biotics. I fucking did them. Had to get loads of tungsten ammo because that combat system is reliant on some very, very, very silly principles. But I somehow made a game out of it, even though it's not a game that anyone else would really think about investing that much time into proving a wiki wrong.
I'm sure you can always get something out of the experiences, but it's saying that it's okay to... You can also get something out of the easier version of it, where you just breeze through.
Oh yeah, I think that's a good example of a series where you can get something out of, because there is challenge to the other things in the game as well. Like, I think that's the key, right? Like, you're then playing the conversation game, not the shooty man game. That's fine. I think maybe, but like, in a shooter where it's just like cutscenes and then gunfights, if you're making the gunfights trivial, then watch a film.
Yeah. That's all the time for questions we've got.
If you'd like to send us some questions, you can do so by emailing questions@crateandcrowbar.com, by tweeting us Crate and Crowbar. You can also leave a question on the forums, which are at www.crateandcrowbar.com/forum/, then press enter.
Surf on over.
Surf on over and log in with your new web friends. If you'd like to follow us individually, you can do that online or off, but we prefer that you used Twitter. On Twitter, I am C Thurston, that's CTHURSTEN. Graham is...
Adgonas, GONNAS.
And Marsh is...
Marsh Davis, DAVIES. Brigador.
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 Brigador. Brigador. Brigador. Brigador. Good.